Hi guys, and welcome to day 7 of my 7-day Loose Floral challenge. Congratulations on making it to the final day. This free 7-day challenge has been designed to teach you everything you need to know about painting loose florals in watercolour. It's designed as just a really comprehensive introduction, and I can't wait to see the progress you've made. Don't worry if you haven't got all your paintings done yet. You can always catch up in your own time and share them in the Facebook group. We're going to keep it open so that people who keep discovering this challenge can keep coming and sharing their work with us. So for the final day, we are going to be painting a lily. Now this is going to build on all of the techniques that we've learned in the previous 7 days, and we're going to learn some new things as well. So we're going to be looking at how we can use wet on wet to create details, and we're also going to use some wet on dry as well to create layers. And then finally, we're going to be looking at how to use mixed media to create layers in watercolour. So you can use gouache or acrylic, or I'm going to be using bleed-proof white. Let's get painting. Alright then, let's get painting. So, supplies recap. I know you're all tired of this bit now. Legion paper, Stonehenge Aqua cold press, 100% cotton, Winsor Newton Professional paints, Princeton Heritage, 40-50 round brushes. All of that is in the description. We've used the same things in the whole class, and any of the colours I'm using are in the description as well. So, for today's flower, we are going to be painting a lily. So this is going to be using some more advanced techniques about wet on dry and layering. We're also going to be looking at using contrast and kind of small details to really bring to life the character of a flower. So for the main flower, I'm going to be using a Winsor red, which is a kind of cool blood kind of red colour. And we're going to be doing a really light value of this, so I want to be mostly water. And then we're going to load up the brush. I'm using a size 8 for this. Start at the centre of the big petals and then pull up and round, even more water than that, and to a tip. So we're creating, and what I want to do is wiggle the brush there to create uneven shapes. So then we're going to create another one, pulling that up and round, like that. And I'm going to do one more, so I'm going to do this in groups of 3. So you can see I'm leaving a bit of white space in the middle and then pulling that up and just really flooding the page with water. Okay. So the reason I'm working quite quickly is that we want to do some really fun wet on wet for this. So I'm just going to go in and pick up a bit of that excess paint there and make it really light, because one of the things we're focusing on here is really high contrast. Right, now I'm going to switch to the smaller brush and go and get a much darker value. And then I'm going to start in the centre. I'm going to do the first one that we painted first and pull out a little bit and let that bleed. Do the same here and the same here. And we're going to go back to the paint, get another dark mix and do the tips of the petals as well. And just allow that to bleed through. I'm also going to do a couple of outlines just slightly outside the edge. So we're going to paint near to the edge and then allow it to touch in places to create some higher contrast. And maybe there. I'm going to dab off some of this paint and then just with a fairly dry brush go and tap in a few little freckles as well. So you can see that we're working wet on wet at the moment, so we're really focusing on getting that spread and allowing it to spread organically. Now, if you get a patch like this that starts to look a bit too big, what you can do is rinse off your brush, dry it on a paper towel, and then come and lift some of that back up if you think it's spreading a bit too far. There we go. And then I'm going to go and just add a little bit more water to even that back out. Okay, so there's the first 3 petals. We're going to do the same thing for the bottom 3. So start off with a larger brush and a really light value. And pull these out. These basically work in a star shape, lilies. Just make a nice jagged edge there. There's one. If you're struggling to keep up, you can try doing one at a time. I'm just working fairly quickly here. Try and keep it loose. 2 and 3. Oh, and 3 now. I got a little bit ahead of my hands there. That was too dark. So we're going to come out and almost do a figure of 8 with that one. Quite like how that's going to look. Okay, smooth all of that out, and then we're ready to add the wet and wet details. This is a really good flower for loose floral practice because it just has so many parts to it. It has big expressive petals, it has high contrast and detail, really elegant leaves. There's just loads of things going on with this one. Little freckle details. Gonna add an outline there. You can also make the edges a little bit kind of wiggly. Just flick your brush around. And don't worry about making this perfect or adding too many details. It's just enough to create a lot of contrast. Okay, dry the brush off, and then we're back to the little freckles. Where we can see that this is starting to dry, we're just going to go and add a few more freckles as well. Now, the drier your paper is, the less your paint will spread, and so the darker it will appear. So it's important to do this in layers as the paint is drying. And then I'm going to restate some of these lines here. I'm going to wait for this to dry a little bit and then add some more kind of dark freckle detail in there. I'm also going to close up the centre bit just a little. There we go. Starting to look like a lily already. Now I think this bit is all quite pale, so I'm going to add a little line detail there. Alright then, just give that another moment to dry. So now we're on the last day of this 7-day challenge. One of the things I want to talk to you about is daily practice. I know that none of you who are starting out in painting want to hear that practice is the only way to get better, but painting every day will see you make much faster progress than if you only do it once a week. And it doesn't need to be an hour. It can be, 10-15 minutes, but it's just getting into that habit of doing a little bit every day, and you will see much faster progress. So that is my #1 top tip for learning to paint loose florals, is just to paint something every day. Even if it's just a few shapes and some blobs and it's a failure and you hate it, just get into the habit of painting every day. That's starting to look a little drier, so we're going to go back in with those details. I'm just tapping the brush in here to create the freckles. You can see in the top ones where it's almost dry, it's barely spreading at all, so we're going to use this opportunity to get some other details in there. The freckles are what make lilies, I think. Go back over that line. Okay, I like how this is drying up. I'm just going to add maybe a little bit more to this one to just get that center line back. So now we're going to switch on to our big brush again, and we're going to do the stems and leaves. So we're going to do the same thing that we did with the peony in terms of framing it with the leaves. So what I'm going to do is pull the stem down and around this way. So starting from the center and then coming down and around. If you are struggling to stay loose, you can always lift your arm up off the paper, but if you find that that's a bit out of control, try using your little finger to kind of prop up, and it will allow you to move your arm a lot more rather than resting your wrist where you don't have usually a huge range of motion. That can help with expressive strokes as well. So then we're going to do a little stem from the base and then pull a leaf up there. And I'm going to make these really bold because they're such a bold flower. Ooh, dripped in there a bit. I want them to be bold and architectural. And I'm going to use quite a light green value. Maybe add a bit of yellow as well. The reason for that is because the lily is in a red, and red and green are complementary colours that are opposite. So we really want the red to be the show stealer. And the green is going to be just supporting. Otherwise we'll end up with something that looks a bit clashing. Go back in with a bit of shadow detail on there. And then we're going to do the same thing and frame curve upwards. So the idea is that the leaves create a kind of V shape that frames the flower. And make sure that that's what the viewer's eye is looking at. Add a bit more yellow. Start from a slightly different part on the stem and then pull up and round. You can see I'm not resting my hand on anything. It takes a little bit of muscle memory to build that up, so it does get easier with practice. But it helps to have that kind of control over the brush. It makes it a lot easier to do expressive strokes like that. And you can take a few goes to get, the shape, the outline that you want. Don't need to get it right first time. Quite like that pale colour, so I'm going to leave that and put the contrast on the top. And add some more at the tip. That's a really nice way if you just want to up the contrast on your leaves, is just to go back over and drop some dark pigment on the tip. It will blend out quite naturally. Okay, we're going to wait for this to dry and then we're going to come back and do the stamen and detail in the centre. Okay, so the centre bit is dry there, so we're going to add the long stamen. There are lots of different ways that you can do this with mixed media. So it's difficult to paint, because watercolours are transparent, it's difficult to paint on top of quite a dark red there with more watercolour. You can do it, you can have to layer it up quite a bit, but what I'm going to do is mix in a little bit of bleed proof white. This is by Dr. P.H. Martins. It's a really good way of adding highlights on top. It's water based, so you can use this or gouache if you've got gouache. You can also use watered down acrylic, but bear in mind that acrylic is not water based. Or you can just use quite thick watercolour and see how you get on. So this is a kind of quite thick white colour, and I'm going to mix it in with the yellow to create a creamy consistency that I can layer. I really like bleed proof white for adding highlights and just mixing up a kind of opaque watercolour for layering like this. So once you've got the colour you want, we're just going to pull some centre bits over. It's okay to let them come out over the top. It kind of disappears on the white paper, but that's fine. We're going to pull out in various directions. Have some shorter than the others, some longer. Curve them in different directions to create the centre stamen. I don't want to overdo this. And then we're going to rinse that off and add the seed things at the end. I don't know what their official name is, but the bits that have all the pollen on them. And if you've ever had lilies as flowers in your home, you will know that they drop pollen all over the place. So we're going to mix up a brown here. Get it on the small brush. I'm using the size 5 for this. And then we're going to add a sort of blob shape at the end. You'll notice that it doesn't blend that well, and bleed proof white is designed obviously not to bleed. If you're using other things like gouache, it might bleed a little better. You can also put some seed blobs at the heart as well, to create the kind of illusion that they're kind of pointing towards the viewer, so you can't really see what they're stood upon, but they are there in the middle. And that's it, all finished. Okay, well done guys, that's it, the final piece is done. You've completed this challenge. Take a moment to appreciate what you've just achieved. To recap, today we've been looking at how to use wet on wet to create detail with the little freckles. We've also looked at using wet on dry to create layers. And then finally, we've used some mixed media as well for the stamen. Please don't forget to share your work in the Facebook group. And also, take a moment to look back at your day 1 painting and see the progress that you've made over the course of just a week. When you practice painting every day, you really will make quick progress. It's my top tip for anyone wanting to get better. Thank you so much for taking this challenge with me, and come back and paint with me again.